Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Look, I've just been asked to talk a little bit about the experience of the meat industry in export market development, so that hopefully you can pick up some tips, and there's a bit of cross-fertilisation between Australian agricultural industries. And the whole of this address, virtually the whole of this address, is about partnership. Because I think the experience of the meat industry has been that one of the practicalities of exporting is that there's got to be a partnership between industry and commerce. If I look at all the great successes of the Australian meat industry in export markets, all have involved partnerships between industry and commerce. Aussie beef in Japan, a partnership between industry and commerce. Australian beef in Korea, a partnership between industry and commerce. Australian beef in the United States, Australian lamb in the United States, all involve partnerships between industry and commerce. And the other thing, if you as an industry are serious about export markets, you've got to invest, and invest significantly. Invest as an industry, and of course invest as individual firms. So my talk today is basically in two parts. The first part is just to go through the strategies that the meat industry follows, and the second part involves a case study. And the case study is Australian lamb, because there's many similarities between Australian vegetables and Australian lamb. I mean, you're a bigger industry than the Australian lamb industry. The Australian lamb industry over the last 25 years has got into exports in a serious way. And, you know, exports have gone gangbusters for lamb, and that's no accident. I mean, it was basically all done on very thorough planning. It's no accident because, you know, basically there's a hard and fast strategy that the meat industry's been following for a number of years. A strategy based on 5 pillars of success. Those pillars being product integrity, market knowledge, market access, business development and branding. And to be honest with you, you look at those 5 pillars and only 2 of them really fall into the traditional marketing area, you might say. So the marketing areas might be business development and branding. 3 of them really fall outside what one might traditionally think of marketing, but they've been absolutely critical for export success. Probably a better representation of those pillars is like this, because the fundamental pillars, the foundation pillars, the pillars that underpin everything else is product integrity and market knowledge. And from market knowledge, you build market access cases and you build marketing cases. From market knowledge, you know where to target your business development and branding. So product integrity and market knowledge, foundation pillars. Absolutely necessary for the success of the Australian meat industry has been its product integrity systems. Utterly, absolutely critical. And they're basically industry systems. Commerce overlays extra bits on the industry systems, but the base systems are industry systems, because in our experience, you're exposed to the weakest link in these export markets. To a degree, Australian product is viewed as Australian product and not a product from supplier Y who just happens to reside in Australia. So we've invested heavily in product integrity systems. We aim to be the world's best in terms of product integrity in the meat industry, and we are the world's best. The Australian meat industry is the world's best in terms of product integrity. We have the world's best product grading system, MSA. We have the world's best on-farm QA system for meat and traceability system. And then we have the world's best ordering systems that have now been taken up by the United Nations. So product integrity, I often say the best money you can invest in export marketing is money you invest back at home in your product integrity systems as an industry, and your individual product quality as commercial suppliers. The second foundation pillar is market knowledge, and again is vital. It involves analysis of general trends, general market opportunities, and market research. So the meat industry has spent a lot of money, a lot of internal research, a lot of research on consultants over the years, on where the growth is going to be, so general market opportunities, where we expect the growth is going to be, because we like being early entrants into markets, and we like being there for the long term, because I tell you, one of the experiences of the meat industry is often you've got to invest for years before you get a payoff in export markets. It's not overnight success. And to have the confidence to invest for years, you've got to have good market knowledge in terms of opportunity, and market knowledge in terms of where your product sits, what sort of attributes are important, consumer research, like this sort of consumer research. And interesting, this is research from Japan, but this is repeated all over the world. Look at what attributes number one, if you can see it, safety. So, you know, that's the link back to those product integrity systems. That's absolutely critical, because that's what people in developing markets particularly are looking for, but also in developed markets. The third pillar is market access. And again, a lot of the market access is done at an industry level. And if there's one thing, well, there's two things probably from the meat industry. A, put a well-researched argument to government, both the Australian government and overseas governments, in terms of market access. And the days of the government doing this sort of stuff, I think, you know, if they're not finished, they're diminishing. I mean, they rely more and more on industry to present to the argument, to present to government market access arguments. So it's to have well-researched cases, and then it's unity. And I mean, to some extent, the government views horticulture as one sector. So I think horticulture needs to be unified in its market access cases, not just within AusVeg, but across horticulture generally. And then we obviously get involved with a lot of publicity, and we get involved in market advocacy, and that's a job that we get our producer groups to do more than industry organisations. The final two pillars are business development and branding. I mean, with business development, this is a process, basically a pretty simple process: leads to prospects to customers. I mean, we get our leads, and I know AusVeg do this also, from participation in trade shows. We do some selected trade advertising. I don't know whether you do that as well. We do PR activities, particularly in new markets. We try to generate a significant amount of PR. But then finally, I mean, we'll actually buy data for business development, because we find business development incredibly important. And it's not getting to the consumer, it's getting to the customers you want, getting to the supermarkets, the food service operators that look on paper as though they might be prospective customers. So, you know, as an industry and as players within the meat industry, a lot of money is spent on just working out who your prospective customers are. And then, of course, once you've got the customers, you've got to keep them. Don't forget about the follow-up. Many people do forget the follow-up. Of course, you want to you often start off with shelf space. In this case, it was about 1 metre. This was in the Philippines when we got a new customer there. If you keep on working at it, the prospects are that you'll make more sales and that shelf space will expand to 3 metres in that case. And finally, branding. And branding in the meat industry is on 2 levels. Firstly, there's country of origin branding. So we spend collective money as an industry in just promoting Australian meat generally. Why? Because it matters to consumers. I mean, this is, I think, from America, this survey, but again, it's the same the world over. 90% of consumers in America take note of country of origin. It's an important criteria for them in selecting what to buy. So you need a good image. So we spend money on just promoting what we can promote across the entire industry, which is our safety record, our integrity systems, our shelf life, all those sorts of things. The things that we can confidently promote as Australia, and then leave it to individual brands to do the rest. And in terms of individual brands, you know, I think the opportunity for branding is greater than ever. And it's greater than ever because of this generation known as the millennial generation. Those are people that have been born since 1980. They're now a quarter of the world's population. They're the first generation ever to be spending more of their income on food. More of their income on food. And food, to the millennial generation, is identity. Food is about social currency. I mean, food is trendy for the millennial generation. So as a brand owner, you know, think about a good story. You know, tell the story about the brand because there's space out there, particularly amongst the millennials, to really attract them to brands with good characteristics and good stories behind them. So, look, I was now going to, I've got a number of slides on Australian lamb in the United States, but I note that it's almost lunchtime, so I thought that I might cut this short by just telling you the story rather than going through the slides. So, you know, as I said, I think there's a lot of similarities between Australian lamb and Australian vegetables. I mean, both industries are small by world standards. Certainly the Australian lamb industry by world standard isn't a big industry if you look at sheep numbers across the world. Both are relatively small Australian agricultural industries. I mean, the vegetable industry, as I said, is a bigger industry than the lamb industry. Both industries traditionally haven't been exporters. So if I go back to 1990, which is about the time that I joined the meat industry, if I go back to 1990, the lamb industry was exporting 13% of total production. By volume, it was probably 10% by value. And it was basically the stuff that no one wanted in Australia. I mean, we sent some, what's called breast and flat, to Papua New Guinea, where you can imagine, you know, they were big payers for lamb, weren't they, in Papua New Guinea? There was a bit of a trade from carcasses from Western Australia up into the Middle East. That was about it. It was product that was hard to sell in Australia. So the lamb industry wasn't an export industry, but some visionary industry leaders in the late 1980s decided that the industry was going to go for exports. And let me tell you what's happened. Over the last 25 years, the lamb industry has grown ninefold in value. Grown ninefold in value. Now, the vegetable industry, according to some ABARE stats that I looked up the other day, had grown about threefold during that same period. Ninefold for lamb, threefold for vegetables. And the lamb industry's growth has been totally on the back of exports. Exports have grown 15-fold during that period of time. So, what we did in the lamb industry is, first of all, search the world for some possible markets. And the one that came up best was the United States. I mean, we looked at their sheep numbers, we looked at their subsidy regimes, we did projections, and we thought that the United States was a good market. We did consumer research. And one thing that consumers told us is that they hardly ever saw lamb on the menu and hardly ever saw lamb in supermarkets. And then we went and saw it at the supermarkets and they said, well, we haven't seen anybody from domestic lamb processors for a number of years now. So we thought that there was prospects, if lamb was marketed well in that market, for us to pick up some business. And just let me tell you what's happened. Lamb sales, Australian lamb sales to the United States in the late 1980s, early 1990s, were about $10 million a year. Now they're $600 million a year. 10 million to 600 million. But it took about 10 years to get it up to about 30 million. So over the first 10 years, there was some growth, but it was pretty minor. So you've got to stick there. You've got to stick in there. You've got to chase your accounts, and we chased accounts like Albertsons and Kroger's and Costco. And don't kid yourself that they'll say yes the first time you walk through their door. They won't. You've got to go back and back and back and back and address concern after concern after concern that they might have with buying your product. So lamb exports have gone from just over 10% of production now to 60% of production. Total lamb exports are now about $2 billion a year, and that's paid off for lamb growers. I mean, lamb prices have gone from about $1 a kilogram at farm gate to over $6 a kilogram now, and it's all on the back of exports. It wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for exports. So, what are the lessons? And look, you can draw your own lessons from this, no doubt you will, and perhaps you won't draw any lessons at all. But let me tell you what I think the lessons are. I mean, this partnership, if you're serious as an industry about getting into exports, this partnership is important. I mean, we're just too small to do it individually. We've got to coalesce as an industry to do it properly. Do your research. From that research, thorough research, make a long-term commitment. Branding's critical, both country of origin branding, Australia branding, and individual company brands. Integrity systems, incredibly important for a high-cost producer, and we're a high-cost lamb producer, just as you are a high-cost vegetable producer, and just make a plan and stick to it. So thank you.